Hello, guys. Welcome to the live stream. About to go live on the radio here. Hello, everyone. About to go live here on the radio. Give my walkaway story today. Whew. Hello and welcome to the Liberty Revolt on 1360 KHNC. It is just me today, your host, Kevin LaRusso. My co-patriot, Bucky, is off doing this weird, abnormal thing of spending time with his family. So wish him the best of luck for that. But yeah, so this is going to be my first show hosting alone, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, we're going to have a great time today. I'm going to be talking about my walkaway story, giving you guys a little bit of background of who I am, of why I am where I'm at politically speaking, what were the things that led me to go from being someone that was a total Bernie bro in 2016 and moving along to being just an anarchist, if you will. Like I went through the whole conservative thing. I did it all. So I think it's a pretty good journey. Maybe it'll be a pretty good story. We'll find out here. And I will be looking at the comments throughout the show. It's going to be very hard for me to keep track of that because I've got a camera up here on my right and my computer's over here on the left. So I will be looking at that more on the break. But first and foremost, don't forget to go over to the Liberty Revolt on 1360 KHNC. That's where I'm at right now. You can find it at 1360khnc.com or Liberty Revolt Media on Facebook, youtube.com/Liberty Revolt. For everything Liberty oriented here in the Northern Colorado area. For those of you from Be the Change coming over to watch today, I appreciate your views. Again, this is the Liberty Revolt is the local news station or the local media that we do here for Northern Colorado. But today's story is going to be for everyone, and it might help you understand more or less why you're at where you're at, or give you a better understanding of what it is that finally opens people's eyes to the narratives being spewed by the cathedral that is our political elites, economic elites, cultural elites, and our intellectual elites. You know, when they work together, when the news media is working directly with the politicians who are working directly with the corporations, you know, that's how we get to where we're at today, and that is what constitutes the cathedral as we're talking about it. So yeah, just to get started, just want to remind everyone that the Libertarian Party up here in Northern Colorado, Larimer County and Weld County, both run by myself and Bucky respectively. We're always looking for more members. Today, there will not be a post-show hangout. We just did not have the time. Look for that next week after the show. We're going to be meeting here at the radio station and potentially going across the street to Cassidy's, the best bar in Johnstown. My favorite bar that is right across the street here. So next week, come down, hang out after the show. We're going to be talking liberty. We're going to be talking activism stuff. We're going to be organizing how we want to approach the coming year in politics. We're going to be talking about that a lot. So if you're interested in anything local politics, don't be afraid to come by. I do want to touch on something really quick before I get into the walkaway story. I want to talk on two very massive cases that are going on currently. I'm sure we're all aware. The Kyle Rittenhouse trial and the Ahmaud Arbery trial. A lot of people have forgotten that second one. Ahmaud Arbery was the man down in Georgia, the black man down in Georgia, who was being held. As the story goes, he was jogging through a neighborhood. Two men stepped out of their truck, tried to hold him at gunpoint, and he ended up being killed. And the story at the time was that he was just an innocent jogger, and these were two racists. Well, you also have the Kyle Rittenhouse, which the media labeled him a white supremacist, and wanted to go out and kill stuff. He was in Kenosha that night to cause damage and mayhem because he brought his AR-15. But the reason why I bring these two up, as I see where somebody said we're having problems with the feed, the reason why I bring these two stories up is because they are going to play. They are good examples of what I'm going to be talking about a little bit later, how the media constructs a narrative. And once that narrative is constructed, it becomes the most important aspect of the story is what the response they are intending to elicit from you. That takes precedence over the truth. If they want you to believe that we live in a racist, white supremacist, destructive nation, they will report the news in whatever way possible they need to elicit that belief from you. Truth be damned at that point. So these two cases are massive. The governor of Wisconsin has already dispatched the National Guard because the writing is on the wall in the Rittenhouse trial. For those of you unaware, no matter what your opinion of the trial going in was, following the prosecution and their witnesses, and they brought up, it is absolutely impossible to be an objective observer and think that he is going to be anything other than innocent of all murder charges. The gun charge will probably stick simply because that was the only law he broke. But the Kyle Rittenhouse, I've been getting a lot of flack on it from Instagram and stuff like that. I put a post up, and I had a friend of mine reach out and be like, "Are you kidding me? This guy went there. He wanted to kill. He took his AR-15 to a place where he shouldn't have had it. Blah, 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 blah." You've heard the narrative. Well, what that narrative assumes is that first and foremost, the only place you're allowed to carry a weapon on you for your protection is in a place where danger is not expected to be present. Because he went to a dangerous area and brought his weapon, he is at fault. It's like, excuse me, that is in fact the only place you would realistically need to bring a weapon. I carry a weapon on me at all times simply because I can. But if I was choosing when and where I would carry it, if you said you can only carry it one of two occasions, one occasion being walking around your incredibly peaceful neighborhood and the other walking around a massive fiery protest riot, I would carry my weapon at the riot rather than around my neighborhood. But what the notion that goes into that is this idea that you are not allowed to carry your weapon into a dangerous place. You're at fault there. Well, the truth is he didn't fire his first shot until he was attacked, until after he was attacked and he thought his life was in danger. That is self-defense. He killed a pedophile, a child sodomizer, proven a domestic abuser, and I forget the crime that the last one was found guilty of, but none of them had clean records whatsoever. But that doesn't matter to the media narrative. He's still a white supremacist. He's still a murderer, all these other things. And because of the media's malfeasance in this case, when he is found innocent, which he will be, there's going to be riots. And the second case is Ahmaud Arbery. Now, this man when I first saw this case and going into watching, I watched about 7 hours of the trial over the last couple of days. I haven't watched the whole thing, but I've watched a lot of different parts of it, including probably the most important part, which was the police officer's testimony from the last couple of days. But the Ahmaud Arbery case seemed pretty cut and dry. These two white men got out of their vehicle and ended up shooting Ahmaud Arbery. Well, what it comes down to is that in Georgia, if you are a citizen's arrest is legal so long as the person you are performing it on is reasonably suspected of having committed a felony. So now the defense claims that they've thought of him as having committed a felony, in this case, burglary. And that is what they're resting their whole thing on, because if he was suspected of it and it was reasonable, then their citizen's arrest was legal and their detainment of it was legal. And when he resisted, they were legally allowed to use force, or at least that's what the defense is claiming. Up until the police officer in the area that had been in the area that the night before and had been patrolling that area took the stand, it seemed like they had no case at all. But in fact, and I will continue this later, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining on the live stream today. Please let me know, Dan. I hope that the feed, the issues with the feed that you're hearing, are getting a little bit better. But I am going to go into the Ahmaud Arbery case a little bit, moving on here, and once I clear that up and I talk about the narratives that were established, I'm going to go into my walkaway story, because it was a lot of the same. There was a lot of the same. Having my eyes opened because I decided to take a rational, logical approach to the news as it was coming out. And then I decided a big part of it is acknowledging my biases and acknowledging how my biases might affect my perception. So I'm going to be going into that quite a bit. If you guys have any questions for me while I'm doing this, please shoot them over and I will get to them during these breaks. You guys can't hear it because I am on the radio here, 1360 KHNC. If you want to hear it live, but yeah, if you guys have any questions, ask me anything. I don't care if it's on topic or not. I'll do my best to answer it during the commercial, but I appreciate you guys sticking on here, trying to give you a good show today. It's always fun being out here and being able to talk. I wish I had Bucky here because it's who'd have thunk that I, of all people, would hi Bucky. You left your laptop here, bud? Well, I didn't see it, but who'd have thought that I, of all people, would be worried about whether or not I could talk to myself for an hour? I'm just kidding. I'm not worried about that at all. We all know I can't stop freaking talking. Bucky, you left your laptop here for me. I'm having no problem at all on my own at this point. So I miss you, bud. I wish you were here with me. Do you have any questions you want to bring up? Hello and welcome back to the Liberty Revolt on 1360 KHNC. It is me, Kevin, all alone, as Bucky has abandoned me for the day. Those of you joining on the live stream, I appreciate it. Go ahead and send over your questions. I will get to them during the break when the commercials are up to everyone else. I hope you're having a wonderful, amazing, beautiful Saturday. I was just discussing the Ahmaud Arbery case and laying out what the defense is looking for in this case. And the defense is looking for it. And the defense is trying to prove that Ahmaud Arbery was not just a jogger. He was a prowler who was suspected of multiple crimes within the neighborhood, but just hadn't been caught at the time. So I'm going to skip over quite a bit and just get to the key information that came out this last Friday when the defense was cross-examining the police officer who was on duty the night before. And the night before, Ahmaud Arbery was once again suspected of going into a man's house. Now, the man who owned the house had previously claimed that he had a couple of different people come to his house, and he was never really worried about Ahmaud Arbery. He was trying to play it for the media that he, in fact, wasn't, that Ahmaud Arbery was innocent and he wasn't culpable in any of the matter whatsoever, when, in fact, this man had given people permission to detain anyone that came onto his property. He had called the police on Ahmaud Arbery specifically multiple times in the lead up, and the night before, the police were out looking to serve a trespass warrant, and they suspected that he had stolen some things within the neighborhood, and the police weren't alone. It was two officers, including the one that was on the stand, and I believe 3 people from the community, 2 of which were the men that ended up shooting him, I believe, the next day. Now, that night, they found out that Ahmaud Arbery was under suspicion. They thought he was armed. The police officers the night before thought Ahmaud Arbery was armed. They went searching through the house on construction that Ahmaud Arbery had been seen in with their guns drawn, suspecting that he was armed the whole time, and they had let the people know that. So what this plays into is that the question becomes, was it reasonable for the 2 men that ended up killing him to suspect that he had committed a felony? And in my opinion, after the testimony of the police officer, it is very easy to argue that it was. Now, I don't think that what they had was necessarily enough, but this is the issue, is that based purely on what the law says, it is incredibly reasonable for a jury to say, you know what, they were the ones, they thought that they had a reason to, and it was actually because of the police malfeasance that this ended up happening. So that case could also potentially swing the wrong way. I think the Rittenhouse one is a done deal. There is no sensible way. In fact, I was hoping for what is called a directed verdict from the judge, where he decides that there is no reasonable way in which someone could be convinced other than of innocence, and he directs the jury in that case, or a dismissal with prejudice, saying that the prosecution, because it seemed like they were intentionally trying to throw the case, because of that they would then have to deal with, that he would then dismiss it with prejudice, meaning it couldn't be retried. Now, the reason I bring it up is because of the narratives that surround both of these cases. The assailants are racist. The assailants are murderers. They're just out there looking for blood, and they were smeared, although not as much as Kyle Rittenhouse was for the 2 gentlemen from Georgia. And what happens is, rather than waiting for the case to go through, rather than the facts to be determined, the media has just rallied this, has just created and cultivated this narrative to the point that Joe Biden came out and condemned Kyle Rittenhouse after he was put in jail last year. And this kind of just pernicious behavior by our mainstream media is constant. It's a narrative that has been constructed over, the past decade or so, past decades, I should say. And it is starting to crumble before us. Every day, more and more people are taking that red pill, seeing through the matrix and realizing that they are just a part of a carefully constructed, like I said, narrative that is designed to elicit the responses that are required. Reality be damned. There is how do I want to put this? There is a concerted effort by those who have the power to control and manipulate the thoughts of those around them. So that's where I'm going to go with my walkaway story. So I was born and raised in a Christian household. I had two wonderful parents that did everything they could to raise me the correct way, even though I was incredibly difficult, and it was an incredibly difficult situation growing up. But for the most part, I went to church a lot, and I was pretty conservative growing up. My father watched Fox News every day, and when I was up until about high school, when I went over to a Christian school where I really started to question everything. I started to question what was coming out of my Christian school. And I just started to question, too, what was coming out of the media that my dad was watching. He can remember, and I'm sure he remembers plenty of times he'd be watching O'Reilly or Hannity or one of those guys that was huge at the time. And I would just sit there and just say, I would point out what they were lying. I would say, like, are you kidding me? This is absolute crap. How could he think that? And I got pretty contentious about things. If to say the least, I was a rebellious little teenager. So my political beliefs started to go from what I was raised with to anti whatever my dad had, in a way. And I started to argue against that. I started to be a contrarian. And so then naturally that started to lead me towards the left. And at first I went to the neoliberal left, where I was kind of like in line with like what the Clintons are, Obama's and all that stuff. Like, it was really funny because in 2008, I was the one saying Obama was a terrible person. And then by 2012, I was on the Obama train. I was like, he's not that bad. He's not terrible. He's not. But it's really funny because it was the same kind of rhetoric that led me to not think Obama was bad, that led me to not think Trump was bad. And I'll get to the Trump part later. But, when the Christian conservatives were calling Obama the Antichrist, well, he's just a really smooth politician. He's a manipulative son of a gun, but he's not the Antichrist. He is just not the Antichrist. And so it was seeing through that very blatant and obvious distortion of reality that I was like, well, if they're lying about that, what else are they lying about? And that pushed me away from the right and into the hands of the left. And I ended up joining the Army in late 2012. I ended up joining Intel. And then when I got to my first school, which was up in Monterey, California, the Language Institute, I was surrounded by a lot of people that were also on the left. And I started to get dug in further and further into my leftist ideology. It wasn't rapid. I was more neoliberal than anything. I was more like a Clinton than anything. I believed in free market capitalism with government regulations, but I also, that wasn't the bad part of the rhetoric. The bad part of the rhetoric comes with how you view the opposition. And whereas conservatives called Democrats Democrats, the Democrats called the conservatives racist, evil, horrible people. And I kind of just bought that hook, line, and sinker. So fast forward to like 2015, the problem with me is that I like authenticity. I don't like, lying, skeezy, slimy politicians. And it was about 2015 when I started to just feel really bad about the Democrat left. Now, I was still on their side policy-wise, but I was like, are you kidding me? Like, these Clintons, these Obamas, these people, they're horrible people too. They're just as bad as the Republicans. But, Republicans are racist and homophobic and all this stuff, so they're just slightly more evil. But when you looked at the politicians, I was like, they're just as slimy. I just want someone to be honest. I just want someone that's, that's a part of the people. And that's when I found him. I found this glorious, wonderful, amazing human being. All he spoke was what was in his heart. And his name was Bernie Sanders. He was the greatest politician ever because he argued for free, universal health care. Yeah, no, I went full in that Bernie train. I still remember when I came home and I told my mom that I was a Democratic Socialist. She goes, "Oh God." And my dad didn't even respond. My dad was just like, "Oh my God." He just looks at me. He goes, "Who is feeding you this information? Who is telling you to believe these things?" Because the one crack I will always give my dad is he didn't believe I had it in me to come to my own conclusions. Although he wasn't necessarily wrong, I did end up where I was at purely from my own beliefs, but listening to what they were saying and basing my beliefs around it. But they, they wanted no part of it. I was all aboard the Bernie train. I was like, "Are you kidding me? We could pay for college for everyone for just $330 a year. That's all it would take. That's all you'd have to pay for this. $330 a year. I think it's greedy for you to not want to do that." And my mom just looked at me and goes, "Well, why don't you pay our share?" I was like, because your money too. Let's take your money too." And at the time, I wasn't really philosophically sound in anything. I didn't, other than I just wanted to do good. And by good, I meant I wanted to give people stuff because I felt bad they didn't have stuff. And so on my journey, I started to I was at this point, I was like, you know what? The conservatives are just greedy jerks. Trickle down economics doesn't work. None of this works. We're the richest. I said all the buzzwords. We are the richest nation in the world. There is no reason why we shouldn't be able to afford this. I started saying I was basically, the same as any college kid you will find on a college campus. I really had no idea what I was talking about. I'll be honest with you guys, though. I was a little bit more informed than a lot of these college kids were. My issue wasn't that I was just saying it because of sophistry. My issue was that I didn't have a moral foundation on which to base it that involved that involved believing consent was necessary. So I thought that coercion was okay at the time because I thought if the government did it, it's okay. So, anyways, I was kind of blinded by this. And 2016 rolls around, and I was firmly in the Bernie train, man. I was all about, America is systemically racist, historically racist. The police brutalize Black people on a regular basis. White privilege exists. All this other stuff. This was like slightly before it really broke onto the mainstream, because of a man who I'm going to talk about in a little bit that played a huge role in my journey. But I was at come 2016, I was a Bernie bro, and I was all about it, and I was getting ready to vote for him, and I thought I was right. I was like, look, man, the left, like, we're correct here. We have the correct position. The conservatives are evil and racist. And so the thing is, though, is I've always really been intellectually honest, or not intellectually honest, intellectually curious. Not, I have my moments of intellectual dishonesty, trust me. But I had recently gotten into the Joe Rogan experience, and I was listening to long form interviews. And so I wanted to listen to another interview. And I saw an interview this man, Dave Rubin, was doing with someone that I believe we all know and love, and someone that Bucky and I got to interview not too long ago, a man by the name of Larry Elder. And I was like, ooh, I want to see how Larry's wrong, because Dave's on my side. I had watched a little bit of Dave before that. He was on my side for a lot of these. And oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not watched the Dave Rubin interview of Larry Elder from 2016 or 2015, the first one he did, whichever one was the first one, go back and watch it. Because in this interview, Dave Rubin basically lays out my entire belief system that I held at the time, my belief system about racism, my belief system about the government, to Larry Elder. And it was as if you watched Mike Tyson step into the ring with a JV wrestler from a bumfrick nowhere school out in Minnesota. He just clocked him over the jaw repeatedly, just hit him with fact after fact after fact, refuted every single talking point that Dave Rubin brought up, said, absolutely not, you're incorrect on all these things, said when Dave would bring up the stuff I would believe, Larry would demolish him. And by the end of that interview, Dave Rubin has even talked about this. By the end of that interview, he was well on his way to the conservative, to the libertarian side of things. And so was I. Like, watching, you can see on his face as his opinion of things is changing and his world is being rocked. And I had that same feeling. Bucky had that same feeling watching it. It was the ultimate red pill. And from that moment on, I began a quest to find out what else I had been lied to. But at the same time, I was still incredibly depressed. I had an issue where I was severe. I was in the military. I was severely depressed. I felt like completely unaccomplished in my life. I was thinking about suicide constantly. and had been for years upon years upon years. I was in a really dark place, and I thought I had nowhere to go in life. And I told you I was intellectually curious, and I had discovered the Joe Rogan Experience. And in that year, there was a man that went on his show that following his first appearance on Joe Rogan, he started a revolution among men in this world, especially young men, disaffected young men. And I am one of those men whose lives I believe he has saved because he saved mine. And that man was Jordan Peterson. When I listened to him on that first Joe Rogan interview for 3.5 hours the first time, like, it legitimately changed my life. He addressed basically so much of what I had felt in my own life about my lack of accomplishment and my lack of direction and everything like that. And he told me, no, it is not the world around you, because I did a lot of blaming. I blamed everything. I was not at fault for any of the problems in my life. It was everyone around me. It was my mother. It was my father. It was what happened to me in my childhood, everything like that. And so when we get back, I'm going to get more into this. You're listening to Liberty Revolt on 1360 KHNC. Ladies and gentlemen, how's it going? Is there any questions really quick? Let's see. Oh, Bucky asked one. He goes, "Why are you gay?" Well, I'm really happy today, Bucky, because I get to do this by myself, and I'm going to talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about. It's great. I don't have an annoying person sitting across from me trying to dictate my conversations. I'm just kidding, but I miss you. I really, really miss you, bud. But yeah, guys. Jordan Peterson was one of the most instrumental factors in changing my life. He really spoke to what was wrong in my soul and helped me understand myself better and get myself on the right path and push me towards becoming the best version of myself. I think one of the greatest things that he ever says is, stop comparing yourself to who you were, or never compare yourself to where someone else is at now. Compare yourself today to who you were yesterday when you go to sleep at night. And that's what matters. That is the most important part, because a lot of the failing that people do is not realizing that the life that matters most, the actions that matter most in your life are the ones you perform. It's not about what other people are doing. All you can control is what you're doing. And if you're putting positivity into the world, you're going to get positivity back. And as long as your only goal is to improve yourself, it is impossible to become the best version of who you are and not be someone everybody else wants to be around. You know the people that are like that are the best versions of themselves, and they're the people that others want to be around. And so he really just helped shape me and guide me along the way. But that's kind of how I dug out my hole there. This is kind of how I started from going from the left towards the right. But you guys are going to wonder how I went from the conservative right down to the ANCAP side of things and started labeling myself an anarchist, because it wasn't just that I went from the left into anarchy. There was a journey there too. And that one revolves more around my friends, and I'm about to talk about them a little bit more right now. But hello, everyone. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me during this, though. It's wonderful to have you here, and I hope you're getting a good show today, because this one's Oops. Sorry about that, everyone. I accidentally hit the wrong button on my laptop, but yeah, no. Actually, one of the biggest things I'm going to talk about him in a little bit was my friend Joseph Young. He's basically my brother, and he was one of the biggest influences I had. Hello and welcome back to the Liberty Revolt on 1360 KHNC. Bucky, I really enjoy all the Tech 9 today. That's not ironic. That's not sarcastic. I actually love Tech 9, but I'm a little bit surprised because I didn't know you were a fan. But yeah, I was just talking about Jordan Peterson before the break and how big of an impact he had on me. I credit him with really being the one to drag me from the depths and make me understand how I had actually been the main instigator of the problems in my own life and how much of a role that had played in shifting me off to the left. And that's because there is a narrative constructed by the media on the left. It is one where they claim to be the loving and compassionate side without any idea what either of those two things mean. So I was on the left because there was this narrative that if you really cared about people, you voted Democrat. If you really love people, you voted Democrat. If you were smart, you voted Democrat. Remember how they say there's more college degrees in blue areas than red areas. Therefore, blue areas are smarter than red areas. Well, that's not true because going to college, I think that it is a much bigger indicator of someone's stupidity if they go to college and spend their time in 4 years and all that time on a gender studies degree or a humanities degree or any of those. Like, I mean, for myself personally, I'm going for a poli-sci and a philosophy dual degree. If I wasn't going to law school, I would think I was literally retarded. But where it's, those were the narratives that were being spun. And then in 2016, it really hit a breaking point. At the same time, when I was starting to realize who I was, thanks to listening to Jordan Peterson, who helped me understand better my own relationship with my family, started to really he really put words and understanding behind how I felt about my relationship with my father and really helped me grow and cultivate a truly special relationship with my father and appreciate what he had done for me when I was growing up. Like when I was growing up, we had an incredibly contentious relationship and filled with fights and all this other stuff. And it wasn't until after this that I really realized just how much he had done for me, how wonderful an example he had been to me in my own life, and how little I had done to show him how much I appreciated it and give him the love that he deserved for the love he gave me, despite all the problems that were coming up. And it started to make me firmer in my beliefs and really start searching and trying to understand who I was. All I knew is I wanted to be a good man. That's all I cared about. And so what did that mean? And at this time, too, you had Donald Trump running for the presidency. I was a Bernie bro, but I really jumped off that train pretty quickly, although I wasn't really a MAGA guy. I was looking more at the libertarian. I kind of almost immediately went towards libertarianism because like I didn't like the conservative right, but I was more conservative. I was more in line with the Republicans. And at the time I was still in the army, so I was still pretty pro-war. I was more neoconservative than anything. But I was leaning libertarian. And so Trump got elected and I still didn't like him. I was still like, I still had, it was as if I still had the radiation left over from the toxicity of the left. And I still hated Donald Trump, but I started to really, really, really see through everything that November when they were calling this guy Hitler. And I was like, look, as bad as he is, like, he's not Hitler. They were saying, oh my God, he's a womanizer. I'm like, dude, I've played sports. I've been in the military, right? I know what locker room talk. Trust me. Look, if we think that the people in the military are heroes, what Donald Trump said, grab him by the was probably get you a G rating by military standards, because there is some, I would just warn any of you guys, if you ever get the chance to visit a military base, stay out of the Porta-Johns, because you're going to see worse things there than you will ever hear come out of Donald Trump's mouth. I promise you. So, but the media was spinning these narratives, these lies. He's a racist. He's a homophobe. He's all of these things. I remembered seeing him standing on the stage. He is the first ever Republican elected being openly in support of the LGBTQ agenda, right? He was the first one to be on that. Not even Barack Obama was on that. So calling Trump Hitler, calling him a homophobe, calling him all these other things, he's just bombastic. He's egotistical. He wants people to love him. People ask, what is his platform? His platform is whatever you want it to be, because all he cares about is getting your vote. And you know what? The thing is, though, is whatever it takes for him that he has to promise you to get your vote, at the very least, he understands from a business sense, he then has to deliver on it. So that makes him better than the politicians that'll say whatever they can to get your vote and then be like, okay, time to do what I want. So I realized during his presidency that, he was actually doing some things good. His Twitter really sucked. But other than his Twitter, he really wasn't that awful. His policies were actually pretty good. Although what was really funny to me is he would fire a lot of people from his cabinet. And people would like really make fun of that. And I go, are you kidding me? Like, don't you wish George Bush had fired Donald Trump or Dick Cheney? These guys had been fired at any point. At least Donald Trump's willing to get rid of his people. Barack Obama just kept people like, like Merrick Garland and stuff around the entire freaking time, performing Fast and Furious and all this other terrible, shady stuff. So it was like seeing just blatant the hypocrisy and the lies and the narrative start to crumble for me. I realized really quick, I was like, okay, so never am I going to trust anything coming out of any corporate media outlet, because I do have a memory. And I remember thinking the same things about Fox News that I thought about CNN. And rather than say, well, it wasn't true about Fox News then, it's only true about CNN now, I was like, well, probably the truth is they both suck. So at this point, I decided I was going to look for independent stuff, YouTube, podcasts, anything that way. And that's, that was a big deciding factor, because I needed to find people to search for. And at the same time, all this was going on, my best friend, Joseph Young, was in my backyard with me every time I went home, just absolutely hammering me on how terrible a lot of my ideas were. And I was a very stubborn person, but his arguments were impossible to get around. He was a full-on anarchist. Well, he's pretty libertarian. He hates the government as much as I do and everything like that. But at the time, he was further along that side. So what he did was a crusade of just asking Kevin just incessant questions and proving how wrong he was the entire time. And sitting in my backyard, I learned more about where I wanted to be in life and what I thought my morals were, and what I realized my morals were than at any other point. So he was leading me in the right direction for people to find. I was finding people like Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, the standard guys on the right. But at the same time, he was pointing me to people like Michael Malice, Dave Smith, Tom Woods, Scott Horton. And I started to really realize, wait a second, like, the reason why I had so many issues before is because, like, deep down, I just know that the government sucks. That's really all I know. I don't really know much else other than the government sucks at everything it does. And so I started listening to the more libertarian people, because the more libertarian people were a lot more on point about the more libertarian people. They had this idea, this non-aggression principle that really vibed well with me. The idea that you don't have a right to transgress upon me, and I don't have a right to transgress upon you. And the only time I get to use violence is when you initiate force, wrongfully initiate force. And so that really vibed well with me, because I realized I value consent a lot, and it makes no sense why consent is not more important. And I started to realize that there is literally nothing the government actually does that isn't coercive by nature. The government does not produce products and then we pay for those products. We pay for those products, and then the government might produce something. It takes it by force and then gives it back to us in the form of really crappy public services. And I started to realize that, oh my gosh, like when I was on the radical left, I didn't care at all about consent, which is really ironic considering they're the side that spearheaded the Me Too movement about how important consent is, and all these other things, except to them, consent only matters when it matters. So I will continue this. You are listening to the Liberty Revolt on 1360 KHNC. All right, ladies and gentlemen in the live stream, how many of you have similar stories to me? How many of you had to deal with having your ideas completely crushed, having your entire narrative challenged and everything like that? Do any of you have similar stories where you were on the left and really what you had to do is confront your entire belief system? Because that's really what this is I had to confront my entire belief system. There was nothing that I could accept as true, and until it was verified. And so my entire the perception I had of the world started to crumble, and I had a bit of an existential crisis. Started to really wonder what the hell even is true. And I came dangerously close to being a flat earther like Jason. No, I actually didn't. I stopped a little bit short of being a flat earther. But I did realize that there is 100% nefarious actors within our power structures. There is something to be said for these things. It's just about how they manifest and what they look like when they manifest. So what it came down to is that what it came down to is that I decided I was going to be intellectually honest, and I was going to acknowledge where my bias was, because as long as I could acknowledge where my bias lies, I would be able to overcome the narrative, because I would be able to objectively look at things and understand that, the best lies are built on a grain of truth. They must be built on a grain of truth. So if you can find that grain, you can see what the lies are. And they normally don't. They lie in their analysis, and they lie in some of the facts, but they don't lie about whether or not the events took place. I will be trying. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Liberty Revolt on 1360 KHNC. Real quick, I want to do a little bit of a Larimer County Libertarian Development Group housekeeping. Once again, there is going to be public comment this Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock in same building as the DMV. I'm pretty sure over there in Larimer County. I think it is 200 West Oak Street in Old Town. That is where the county commissioner's offices are held, or meetings are held, and there will be public comment starting at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. I will be there this Tuesday. I am looking forward to being there. Nick, I hope to see you there as well. As you all know, these local movements are the most important, and I want to get to where that came from, because I can't tell the whole story, so I'm kind of going to give you brief breaks. So I got out of the Army in 2018, immediately went to Colorado State University. It was the only college I applied to because I just wanted to go to Fort Collins. I adore Fort Collins. I had spent many weekends up here while I was in the Army, and I just loved it. So I came up to Colorado State, and I think it was my third week on campus. I was walking around, and this little blonde girl comes up to me and goes, "Do you love America?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I love America." Well, her name was Isabel Brown, and she got me into Turning Point USA at Colorado State University, and I fell in love with Turning Point. Not necessarily for the politics of it, although I agreed with most of it, the big gov sucks stances. But what I love most about Turning Point and continue to love to this day is at the CSU chapter, what Charlie Kirk has empowered us to do, whatever your ideas of his thoughts are, what he created is actually pretty astounding, because it allowed me to build a community on this campus that cherished open discussion, open debate, gave a safe haven to people to have political discussion no matter what side of the aisle they lined up on, and allowed me to cultivate a community at Colorado State that was able to have really good discussions and start to foster an intellectually curious population on what is very brainwash heavy college campuses. So I started to get really involved there, and as I was continuing along this line of political awakening, I was taking philosophy classes. I was taking, religion classes, because I wasn't really Christian at this point, but I started taking classes on Buddhism, on Islam, on all the religions you can think of, and really diving deep into these, especially Buddhism and Taoism and Confucianism and these kinds of things. And what I realized along the way really was that a lot of these religions had foundational principles that were very common with each other. And I thought to myself, that is how you become a good man. You appreciate these principles and you try to live them out in your daily life. And that's what I've tried to do ever since. And that's more than anything that has been guiding me on my journey these last couple of years. It's just my desire to cultivate good characteristics like integrity, like honesty, truly loving people, because the less version of love, for example, manifests itself with when a teenager comes to their mother and says, "I don't identify as anything that exists on the human spectrum of gender." Their idea of love is saying, "Oh, cool, you're perfect just the way you are," rather than, if you truly love someone and care about them, being like, "Okay, that's cool. Now let's really discuss what's wrong here, because I'm kind of fine with you doing this, but so long as you acknowledge that there's something going on, and I'd like to, as your parent, find out what this is, so we can actually help you become help solve the problem." That's the two different versions of love. And so realizing that these are the characteristics that you want to seek out and cultivate in your own life has really guided me along my journey, because I realized, like, look, one of the most important things is there's nothing I'm 100% correct on. There's nothing you are 100% correct on. No one is 100 correct on anything. So even if that means I'm only 99%, your goal, knowing that no one can be 100% correct, should then be searching everything I say for the one thing I'm getting wrong to correct it, right? What that means is that no matter who you're listening to, you're always trying to find out what they're incorrect about and figure it out, and figure out what the truth is, what reality actually is. So upon understanding that principle, the only morally correct stance I could take came from Michael Malice, he's been one of the main he's been one of the most influential people in my journey over the last couple of years. The way he puts it is perfect. You do not speak for me, and I do not speak for you. Everything else is just applying that principle, be it economics, education, the military. Everything else is just applying that principle, because that's the only morally correct one. All a democracy is right now, especially a two-party system, is voting for who gets to point the gun at the other people for the next couple of years. And I think that's wrong. And I think that's morally objectionable. And my whole goal is, like, I say I'm an anarchist, and on principle, that's what I am, but I am an objectivist. I'm a Randian objectivist. There is an objective reality that exists in the world where functions happen that are objective in this world, that just because I believe they shouldn't happen doesn't mean they won't. It's the is versus ought situation. So I take my role to be just reminding people that, hey, the government is an inherent evil. It is an inherently coercive force that is defined by having or the state, I should say, not governments necessarily. The state is an inherently coercive force that is defined by its monopoly on violence. That is what makes the state a state, having the monopoly on violence. And so because of that, I realized, well, that's kind of morally objectionable. I want people to be able to live the life that they want to, so long as they are not harming others, so long as they are demonstrating they're not harming others. Which is why I want to just give an example. I believe that governments would still exist, because a city government is not the same as a state government. And I can voluntarily exit a city's. I should be able to voluntarily say, you know what, I don't want to live in the geographical boundary of Fort Collins. I want to live just outside of it. And when I'm on my private property, I'm allowed, say Fort Collins bans alcohol and drugs and guns. On my private property, though, I'm still allowed to have drugs and guns and alcohol, and they can't do anything about it. But if I bring it out there, because I know what the law is and I can consent to it or not, they have the right to hold me to it. But they don't get to tell me what my rights are on my own property. So that's kind of where the line is drawn. And I think that should be the attitude. So long as what I'm doing on my own private property is not affecting you, I should legally be allowed to do it, or someone else's consent, right? But the way it works out is that, people think that all that means is I don't love government. No, what it means is that I have reached a point in my life, in my political journey, where I realize I don't know what the answers are. You don't know what the answers are. And the only way we can figure that out is by discussing it and actually working towards it. You are listening to the Liberty Revolt on 1360 KHNC. Ladies and gentlemen, we are entering our last little portion of the live stream today. This is going to be the last commercial break I'm on, and I want to thank you guys again for sticking around and listening to what I have to say. It's a little bit difficult to get the entire story out in such a short time, but it's fun to get it out there, because I want people to be able to hear and understand and potentially have something to relate to, because a lot of this revolves around the narrative that was constructed, and how once it was broken, just how much I had to seek for the truth, and how hard it is to continue to seek for the truth, because there's a lot of stuff we don't want to acknowledge that is the truth, because it goes against what we believe and what we want to be right. But you know what? I'm an anarchist, and there are things I know is not correct. I know you can't just let people do drugs on the street, even if drugs are legalized, because you're actually doing more harm in that person's life than good to an extreme degree. Right? If someone's shooting heroin on the streets, the correct answer is not to just walk by them. The correct answer is try to actually help them. That's what God calls me to do. And so in instances like that, yeah, you know what? Maybe the anarchist answer is wrong, and I'll admit that, and I won't put that part into practice. But you still have to give me a justifiable reason why coercion should be okay in any given situation. And so, like I said at the end there, what my journey has taken me to is the point of realizing that I have no idea what the real truth is. Almost no one else does. And any politician who stands on a stage and says they know what the truth is obviously lying to you. And that's what I hate the most, is if anybody steps on a stage and tells you definitively, I know what the answers are, he doesn't, and my answer is correct and nothing he wants is correct, they're wrong. They're lying. They are 100% lying. They know they don't have the answers. And if they do, they're still like, if they still think they do, like, legitimately, then they're dumb. So... Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the final segment of the Liberty Revolt on 1360 KHNC. You are here today with Kevin LaRusso because Bucky Dillon decided that his family was more important. How freaking dare he? How dare you, buckaroo? I'm just getting to the end here, and I kind of concluded the last segment by saying that what my whole entire political journey has led to is this point where I'm at now, where all I know is that I don't know everything. I have no idea what a lot of the answers are. All I know is that having studied enough, Taoism and Buddhism and Judaism, all that matters is the moment. And there's a balance to be found in life. And there's a balance to be found through all things. It's very rare that that one side or the other has all of the answers. It's usually a combination of the two. Maybe the thing that the left is complaining happens is really the way things happen, but the solution the right proposes that answers a different set of problems is actually a better answer. And the only way you'll ever figure that out is by understanding that all we are is people. All we are is human beings. We all share the same suffering in life. We all share the same kinds of pain. And at the end of the day, the only way we can actually make that better for each other is if we work together, if we love each other and understand that we are all flawed human beings. As you notice on the left, perfection is the expectation because people on the left legitimately are scared to admit that they're wrong, that they are flawed, that they are broken human beings. They don't want to be told that their ideas are incorrect. They don't want to be told that they're not perfect. Everybody gets a medal mentality is toxic and it's poisonous, and it keeps it so that we cannot actually achieve in life and that we cannot push ourselves forward, because the only way you can push yourself forward is if you're able to acknowledge where you're wrong and fix it. And so my political journey has not been one of so much of politics, and my politics has not been guided so much by just who I listen to. My politics has been guided with the principles that I value and the ideas that I actually believe are true and the morals that I want to push forward. Those are what guide my politics. I'm not just going to be some kind of Hannity Homer because he's on Fox News. Oh, by the way, he still hasn't explained why that guy was up there touting a CIA pin on his lapels. Okay, who's bought by the state, the deep state they keep railing on. But yeah, no, just to get a little off track there. What I'm getting at is that the political journey that I've gone on is one that I hope many of you can go on as well. One of self-discovery, of intellectual curiosity, trying to actually discover what the truth is, regardless of what your own beliefs are, because at the end of the day, there is an objective reality we live in, and we are so hell-bent on sculpting it into what we want it to be, that we are unable to accept what it actually is. And it's causing division, and it's causing pain, and it's making things worse. So the moral of my story is we can only move forward by acknowledging that the Democrat or the Republican across the street is not an evil person. They just have a different set of beliefs. And the only way we can truly understand them is if we take the time to understand who they are as a person, not who they are as a demagogue. Demagoguery is only going to lead to toxicity, and that's what led me first to the right and then the left and then back again. It was all sophistry and demagoguery and just ideas without substance. And at the end of the day, I just want to call on everyone who's listening now to just take the time to look into themselves and say, this is where my bias is at. When I'm listening to news story, I'm going to ask myself, what do I want the truth to be, and how is that clouding my interpretation of the reality right now? Because that's going to cause so much good in your life if you're just able to do that before you listen to stuff. Because the only way we can get out of the problems we're in today is through love, is through actual, real love towards each other, and understanding that we have the power, and that power is unlocked when we understand that the narrative the cathedral has constructed is one that intends to divide us, but we love each other too much for it to work. They think that they can get us to hate each other, and they can't, because I know I love you. I've never met you, but I know I love you. 100% I know I love you. And that's the attitude we need to have. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to the Liberty Revolt on 1360 KHNC. Go check us out over at libertyrevoltmedia.com, facebook.com/Liberty Revolt Media, youtube.com/Liberty Revolt. Join us next week after the show to do a little bit of Liberty discussion. All righty, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for joining me today. It has been an absolute pleasure to be with you. Unfortunately, I got to get rolling out of here. I got dinner in Haha, just kidding. All right, but seriously, ladies and gentlemen, I will see y'all tomorrow. Not tomorrow, but sometime later this week. Catch me Tuesday on Truth Will Set You Free over at Be the Change. Check out the Liberty Revolt on libertyrevoltmedia.com. I've got an article coming up discussing the recent mandates here in Larimer County and the protests that went with them, if you're interested in any of that. Otherwise, have a good rest of your weekend. Take care.